There are some benefits with being a long-term wrestling fan. There's a benefits in particular for me, who was a wrestling fan before the Ruthless Aggression era, before AEW, before ECW, before the WWE was even called WWE. And one of those things is I can kind of go back and think about why things have happened and why certain things are the way they are today in the wrestling world. One of the things about the pro wrestling world these days in the fandom is there are a lot of vehement anti-WWE fans. A lot of people who are against the corporate nature of WWE for various reasons. However, this did not used to be the case. I myself, although I don't hate WWE, they are certainly not my favorite wrestling company and haven't been for quite some time. And there are a lot of things they do as far as their business practices, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera, that I just don't like. And I had to sit back and think and go, well, when did that first really start happening? And when did I notice, not only within the community, but with myself, when this kind of backlash against WWE started? And even though it's less of what it was back then, today, and there's a lot more favorable attitude in the wrestling community towards WWE because they've been producing a better product for what they do over the last couple of years, there was a long stretch in which that wasn't the case. And thinking back on it, I had to come to one particular incident. Ironically, I looked it up, and that incident actually happened 14 years ago this very weekend.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a visitor. We saw him earlier tonight. That's Wade Barrett. Obviously distracted, but there's a five-knuckle shuffle. John Cena with... Punk's not still with them. You know, look at King. Punk and Gallows are out. They're out here at ringside. Cena in the ring. I don't think they came to make friends with John at all. My lord, the ref. Cena went after Barrett, but ladies and gentlemen, it's 8-on-1. It's the buggy. You're right. It is 8-on-1. This is just yeah.
As a bit of context for me as a wrestling fan, I had, after the Monday Night Wars, still remained a hardcore fan about to 2004, and then things just kind of got stale. WWE became very formulaic. There were very few surprises. There was very few edgy things that were going on. TNA was on the come up, but I wasn't really getting into TNA as much as I had been WCW and the NWA and the WWF before it. By the late 2000s, I kind of become a casual fan, I guess you would call it. I still had Raw on every single Monday, mainly out of habit, but instead of me really paying attention to all 3 hours of the show, it was kind of on in the background. I'd watch the first opening segment and then kind of tune back in every couple minutes here or so just to see what was going on the show. WWE Raw in particular was a very formulaic show and had reached this point of just being kind of a, I don't know, robotic in the way that it was presented. This was not the WWF that I loved in the 80s. This wasn't the WWF that I loved in the 90s. This was something totally different. It was a public company that was making a very watered down, very safe, very worried more about commercial viability than they were about content type of company. And then this Nexus thing happened. Now, when the Nexus event happened, I remember hearing all of the noise in the other room because I wasn't even in the room watching the show when it was on television. And I went in and I was like, what is going on? And I saw the Nexus, this group of 8 quote unquote rookies, come back to that in a second, who were attacking John Cena and attacking the ringside crew and attacking the announcers, and Justin Roberts got choked with a tie. We'll bring that back soon. And it felt like something out of the ordinary, something different. Finally, after all of these years, wrestling was exciting again. It was so exciting, and I remember at the time saying, I have not been this excited about watching wrestling in a long time. For the entire week following that, I spent all my time free time, I should say, on my free time, going on YouTube. Yes, you could do that back then, and looking at all of the NXT stuff that me and most other people didn't watch at that time. And this was NXT back when it was a game show, and it was a big joke. And it's, again, part of the reason why I fell off with WWE in the 2000s, or should I say they fell off with me. And there was something in that show. There was this underlying, ongoing, on-screen rivalry between Michael Cole and a wrestler known as Daniel Bryan. And that's when I started figuring out that this Daniel Bryan wrestler, even though I was not as into wrestling in the 2000s as I had been before, I didn't know he was a wrestler already. This guy actually had already had a long wrestling history. He'd been wrestling for close to 10 years at this point, as had Stu Bennett, Barrett, Wade Barrett, whatever name they gave him or were going to give him at the time. These guys were not rookies. Some of the other guys were rookies, but a lot of these guys had already been wrestling for a while, and they were vying for a contract on WWE television. This is a significant thing to bring up because it was not like this before, and it does help inform me as to probably why a lot of the wrestling fans today are the way that they are now and how different that is. Because remember, again, like I said, this was 14 years ago. So a lot of wrestling fans who are in their 20s and 30s now, this is probably around the time they got into wrestling, and the attitude that they have probably stems from stuff like this. Now, I say that it's a big difference because before this, I did not remember wrestlers coming in from other companies into the WWF/WWE being treated like this, being called rookies. Before, when the Road Warriors or Dusty Rhodes or Ric Flair or Harley Race or Rick Rude or anybody came into the WWF, they were treated like, hey, this is a new character coming into the WWF. They're going to compete with your other favorite WWF superstars. Imagine if they had treated Scott Hall as a rookie when he came in instead of treating him as Razor Ramon, or the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase as if he was a rookie when he came in as Ted DiBiase. Even though those guys wrestled in companies that were smaller and not as popular as the WWF, they were still treated with some respect for what they had put into the business. This was decidedly different now with this Nexus thing, where we were seeing guys like Wade Barrett and Bryan Danielson, or Daniel Bryan, who had already had some sort of a name and clout in the wrestling community, being treated as if they were just fresh off the boat. That's a significant change in the way WWE did things, and it's a change that still exists to this day. We've seen over the course of the last 14 years, them treat AJ Styles in some respects like he was a rookie. Them treating Kevin Owens as if he was a rookie.
So, young man, from one champion to another, allow me to bestow on you some veteran advice.
Whoa, wait. Veteran advice? Are you kidding me? Let me make something clear here. I've been doing this for 15 years. In fact, I've been doing this longer than you. The only difference between you and I is that I didn't get a break until now. So you don't get to give me advice ever. You understand me?
That is one of the things that wrestling fans like myself really disliked about WWE, modern WWE. But it wasn't the only thing that was wrong with this rivalry, and why I think this is the rivalry, this is the storyline that led me to start disliking World Wrestling Entertainment. The angle was great. I thought it was cool. And after that, like I said, I went back, I researched the whole thing. I was like, oh, this Michael Cole, Bryan Danielson thing, that seems like what may have spurred this on. Maybe these guys are all rookies and wrestlers from other territories who are trying to invade the WWE, but they're doing that whole NWO thing in a little bit of a different way. Well, with eager anticipation, I actually remember literally I could not wait till the next episode of Monday Night Raw. And I was counting down the hours. I remember an hour before the show went on the air, I was like, man, can't wait for this. Let's see what's going to happen. Tuned into the show, and within the first 5 minutes, I was disappointed. Number one, Daniel Bryan wasn't there. The guy I had been seeing as one of the catalysts and assuming was one of the catalysts for this attack, again, given the feud he was having with Michael Cole and The Miz on the NXT show, with them calling him a rookie and him saying, I've been at this longer than you guys have, I thought he was going to be the main or at least one of the main guys, even though Wade Barrett was the leader, he was probably going to be the second in command. And he wasn't on the show. I immediately went online to try to find out what happened. And again, thanks to the internet, I found out within a couple minutes that he had already been fired from the company before the show went on the air. The reason? Because he choked Justin Roberts with a necktie for a couple of seconds on the attack angle the week before. And I'm sitting here going, isn't this the company that not that long ago had Kane trying to set people on fire and tombstoning Linda McMahon and throwing people in wheelchairs off of the stage? Isn't this the company that had Brian Pillman with a gun threatening Stone Cold Steve Austin? Isn't this the company that had Stone Cold Steve Austin with a toy gun playing with Vince McMahon who peed his pants live on air? Isn't this the company that buried people in concrete, Paul Bearer, live on television? Isn't this the company that did all kinds of things, even back in the day, having Jake the Snake Roberts take a cobra and have it bite Macho Man Randy Savage on on nationwide television for a good 5 minutes with Elizabeth crying her eyes out at ringside. Ric Flair insinuating that he had a affair with Miss Elizabeth back in 1992. The point being, the WWF and wrestling in general, up until this point in the 2000s, had always had this kind of air of there's something dangerous that could possibly happen. As cartoony as some of the stuff they did in the 80s and 90s was, every once in a while they would drop something on you to be like, ooh, that's a little bit pushing the envelope a little bit. And of course, we had come out of the Attitude Era where the whole thing was about pushing the envelope. But now that was over. We were in corporate WWE land where everything was saccharine and everything was washed to death. And here we were with the new angle and a necktie choke for 2 seconds on television. Not only got dropped out of the angle, but the wrestler who did it had already been fired from the company. So that was a sting a bit to the angle. And within the next couple of hours, I became even more disappointed because the show just continued on as if nothing really big had happened. And we were back to the same old routine Monday Night Raw show that we've been watching for several years at that point. Over the next couple of months, many of you know what happened. The Nexus got defanged and defanged and defanged. And what started out as looking like a very hot angle with a bunch of guys who were probably going to benefit massively by being part of this new invasion angle that we hadn't seen one in over 10 years in wrestling at this point. And they were coming across as a bunch of badasses. All of them got neutered with over the next 6 months to the point where John Cena, and this is a whole thing from SummerSlam that year, pulled his weight and got a win over the Nexus at SummerSlam when a lot of people, including Chris Jericho and Edge, who kind of leaked the story, said the Nexus probably should have gone over on that show. And they would go back and forth with some things, and they would split up and become the core, and then you have two different groups, and people were leaving, and they kicked this guy out, and then they were faces, and within 6 months to a year, the Nexus angle had completely fizzled out, and for me, it fizzled out really after a week. All of that taken into consideration, I have to look back on that moment and say, yeah, before that, you know, even though the 2000s, like I said before, I was a casual fan, that was the era of Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker having their series of matches at WrestleMania that were epic and still to this day some of the best wrestling matches you will ever see in your life. Even the Cena Rock whole thing with their WrestleMania feud and angle that they did, it was at least interesting. And there was still this kind of respect for the wrestlers back then, whether they were from WWF, they were from WCW or ECW, it didn't matter. They were trying to say, hey, here's a new star, WWE Universe. And now we were effectively burying talent. And in fact, not only burying talent, but acting like talent that had been wrestling for 5 or 10 years in other places were now quote unquote rookies. This was the beginning of a lot of the backlash amongst the pro wrestling community. Again, there's a little bit of a difference between people who watch all of wrestling, or at least WWE and other wrestling companies, and people who just watch WWE. Comparison again, for those of you who are new, it's like a comparison of people who are film fans, who watch a lot of different movies and films, of different genres, and then people who are just fans of like Marvel Studios or something like that, right? So that's when my respect started to go for WWE, and a lot of people felt that way. That led to the 2010s, which fortunately saw a revival in wrestling outside of WWE, but that's a tale for another time. But I wanted to share this with you guys because, again, this week is the 14-year anniversary of that Nexus angle, and I want to know what you guys think. Were you around at the time? Were you a fan after that? Do you know the difference between the way they presented wrestlers from outside companies before the Nexus angle and how they did at the time of the Nexus angle? Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. I will see you guys this weekend. We got some big stories and big shows to, of course, New Japan Pro Wrestling, one of their biggest shows of the year. The Dominion show is happening this weekend, so we will be doing a review of it coming up this Sunday. So stay tuned for that. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when that video comes out. Until next time, I will see you guys here for more news, rumors, and commentary on the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling. Have a good day.